The park was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that made the rustling leaves sound louder than they were. The sun had just begun to dip below the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. A lone jogger puffed his way down the path, and a few kids played near the swings, their laughter carrying through the air. Officer Reynolds walked his usual patrol route, his boots crunching lightly on the gravel. He was a seasoned cop, used to dealing with rowdy teens or the occasional drunk, but nothing too serious. Tonight felt like another routine shift, until he spotted the man on the bench. Something about him stood out. He wasn't reading a book or staring at his phone like most people. Instead, he sat perfectly still, his eyes scanning the park with an intensity that didn't match the peaceful setting. Dressed in a plain black jacket and dark jeans, he looked ordinary, but his posture screamed something else. Reynolds slowed his steps, his instincts kicking in. Maybe it was nothing, but years on the job had taught him to trust his gut. He adjusted his belt and approached casually, trying not to spook the guy. "Evening," Reynolds said, nodding. "Mind if I ask what you're up to?" The man turned his head slowly, his expression unreadable. "Just enjoying the view." His voice was calm, too calm. No hint of surprise or irritation at being questioned. Reynolds frowned. "You from around here?" "Passing through," the man replied. Reynolds glanced at the duffel bag sitting beside him. It wasn't bulging, but it wasn't empty either. "You mind opening that for me?" The man's eyes flickered, just for a second, before he smiled. "Sure." But as he reached for the bag, Reynolds noticed the way his fingers hesitated. That split-second delay was all he needed. His hand moved to his radio. "I'm gonna need you to step back, sir." The man sighed, like this was just a minor inconvenience. "Officer, I really don't think that's necessary." "Step back," Reynolds repeated, firmer this time. The park suddenly felt too quiet. The kids had stopped laughing. Even the breeze seemed to pause. Then, in one smooth motion, the man reached into his jacket. Reynolds reacted instantly, his training taking over. "Hands where I can see them." But the man didn't stop. His fingers emerged, not with a weapon, but with a small black wallet. He flipped it open, revealing a badge. A very familiar badge. FBI. Reynolds' stomach dropped. The man's expression didn't change. "Like I said, officer, just enjoying the view." Officer Reynolds stared at the badge, his grip on his radio tightening. The golden shield gleamed under the fading sunlight, unmistakably real. His mind raced, had he just interrupted an undercover operation? The FBI agent snapped the wallet shut and slipped it back into his jacket. His calm demeanor never wavered, but there was a sharpness in his eyes now, like he was reassessing Reynolds. "You've got good instincts," he said. "But this would have gone smoother if you'd walked away." Reynolds swallowed hard. He'd dealt with feds before, but never like this. "I didn't get any memos about ops in the park," he said carefully. "You mind telling me what's going on?" The agent glanced past him, scanning the area again. "Not here." A chill ran down Reynolds' spine. If this guy was legit, something big was happening. And if he wasn't legit, well, fake badges weren't unheard of. He keyed his radio, keeping his voice low. "Dispatch, this is Unit 14. Requesting a badge verification on an FBI credential, hold for details." The agent's jaw tightened. "You're wasting time." "Procedure," Reynolds said, not backing down. He wasn't about to get played. Before dispatch could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the park, distant, but unmistakable. A gunshot. Both men froze. The agent was on his feet in an instant, his hand back inside his jacket. "Get down," he hissed. Reynolds dropped behind the bench just as another shot rang out, closer this time. The kids near the swings screamed, scattering in panic. His training kicked in, active shooter protocol, but before he could call for backup, the agent grabbed his arm. "Listen to me," the agent said, his voice urgent. "There's a fugitive in this park. Armed, dangerous, and desperate. I've been tracking him for weeks. Your guys don't know the situation. If they rush in, people die." Reynolds' pulse pounded in his ears. He had no reason to trust this guy. But the gunfire? The fear in the air? That was real. Another shot. Closer. The agent's grip tightened. "Your call, officer. Help me end this quietly, or risk a bloodbath." The screams of park-goers faded into the background as Officer Reynolds processed the agent's words. Every instinct told him to call for SWAT, lock down the area, but the look in the agent's eyes held him back. This wasn't just procedure anymore. This was life or death. "Talk fast," Reynolds said, keeping low behind the bench. "Who are we dealing with?" The agent's voice dropped to a whisper. "Guy named Kovac. Ex-military, suspected in 3 killings across state lines. He's here to meet someone, and he will shoot anyone who gets in his way." Another gunshot cracked, this time followed by the sound of splintering wood. Too close. Reynolds peeked over the bench and saw a figure darting between trees about 50 yards away, tall, wearing a dark hoodie, moving with terrifying precision. The agent yanked him back down. "He's circling. Wants to pin us." Reynolds' radio crackled. "Unit 14, status update." He muted it. No time for explanations. "What's your play?" he asked the agent. The agent unzipped his duffel bag just enough for Reynolds to see the glint of a compact rifle inside. "I need you to draw his attention. Just for 5 seconds." Reynolds' stomach twisted. Bait. But the park was still full of innocent people, families, joggers, kids. If this turned into a shootout. A woman's scream cut through the air. Kovac was getting closer to the playground. "Now," the agent growled. Reynolds took a deep breath, then burst from cover, his service pistol drawn. "Police! Freeze!" Kovac whirled toward the voice, just as the agent lunged sideways, rifle raised. 2 suppressed shots whipped through the air. Kovac staggered but didn't go down. With a snarl, he returned fire, bullets kicking up dirt near Reynolds' feet. The agent cursed and rolled behind a tree. Reynolds dove behind a picnic table, heart hammering. This had gone sideways fast. Somewhere nearby, a child was sobbing. The agent locked eyes with him across the battlefield the park had become. No words were needed. They were both in this now, and only one of them was walking away. The gunfire had stopped, for now. An eerie silence settled over the park, broken only by the distant wail of approaching sirens. Reynolds pressed his back against the picnic table, gripping his pistol so tight his knuckles ached. His mind raced. Kovac is wounded. The agent missed his kill shot. And now we're all sitting ducks. Across the way, the FBI agent signaled with his fingers, 3, 2, 1. On cue, Reynolds popped up and fired 2 shots toward the trees where Kovac had last been seen. The instant the bullets flew, the agent broke cover, sprinting in a wide arc to flank their target. A guttural roar erupted from the trees. Kovac lunged out, blood soaking through his hoodie, and fired wildly. Reynolds ducked as bullets shredded the picnic table above him. Splinters rained down. Then, a single, precise gunshot. Kovac jerked like a marionette with its strings cut. He collapsed face first into the dirt. The agent stood 20 feet away, smoke curling from his rifle's barrel. "Clear," the agent called, but his weapon stayed raised as he approached Kovac's body. Reynolds scrambled to his feet, scanning the park for civilians. "Everyone okay?" he shouted. A few terrified faces peeked out from behind trash cans and playground equipment. "No blood." No new bodies. The agent knelt beside Kovac and pressed 2 fingers to his neck. After a beat, he looked up at Reynolds. Got him. Relief flooded Reynolds' system, until he noticed the agent's expression. Not triumph. Not even satisfaction. Just grim focus. Why's an FBI agent working solo on something like this? Reynolds asked, holstering his weapon. The agent stood, wiping blood from his hands. Wasn't solo. He nodded toward the duffel bag still on the bench. My partner was supposed to be here. A cold realization settled over Reynolds. The bag wasn't just for weapons. It was a go bag. A contingency bag. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights flashed at the park entrance. The agent grabbed his duffel and slung it over his shoulder. You should know something, he said quietly. Kovac wasn't here to meet a civilian. He locked eyes with Reynolds. He was here to meet a cop. Reynolds felt the words like a punch to the gut. A cop? His hand instinctively drifted back toward his holster. You better explain that right now. The agent didn't flinch. Kovac had a handler inside the department. That's how he's been evading capture across 3 states. The distant sirens were almost on them now. When my partner didn't show tonight, I knew something was wrong. Reynolds' mind flashed to the officers who'd be rolling up any second, guys he'd worked with for years. Could one of them really be dirty? You got proof? Before the agent could answer, shouts erupted from the parking lot. Police! Hands where we can see them. The agent's posture went rigid. That's your problem, officer. I don't know who to trust anymore. In one fluid motion, he pulled a flash drive from his pocket and pressed it into Reynolds' palm. Everything's on here. Names. Dates. Money trails. Reynolds stared at the tiny device. It felt like holding a live grenade. Boots crunched on gravel as a SWAT team advanced. The agent backed toward the tree line. Your choice now. Play dumb and hand that over to your bosses, or find out what's really going on. Reynolds opened his mouth to protest, but the agent melted into the shadows like smoke. Reynolds. Sergeant Hayes emerged from the chaos, rifle raised. What the hell happened? Dispatch said shots fired. His eyes dropped to Kovac's body, then to the flash drive barely concealed in Reynolds' fist. A beat passed. Too long. Hayes' finger twitched near his trigger guard. You alright, brother? The question hung in the air like a blade. Reynolds closed his fist around the flash drive, the plastic edges biting into his palm. Hayes was watching him too closely, that slight tension in his stance, the way his eyes kept flicking to Reynolds' clenched hand. Got ambushed, Reynolds said, keeping his voice steady. He nudged Kovac's body with his boot. This guy opened fire. I returned shots. That's it. Hayes didn't move. Around them, officers fanned out, securing the scene. The radio chatter was constant, perimeter secure. Medic for the civilians. But in this little bubble, time felt frozen. Finally, Hayes lowered his rifle. You're lucky to be alive. He stepped closer, voice dropping. We'll need your weapon for the investigation. Standard procedure. Too standard. Too quick. Reynolds nodded slowly. He'd known Hayes for 8 years. They'd worked midnight shifts together, covered each other's backs. But now all he could see was the way Hayes' thumb kept tapping against his vest, nervous energy. Or anticipation. As Reynolds handed over his gun, he made sure to turn his body, slipping the flash drive into his back pocket in the same motion. Any witnesses giving statements? Hayes' eyes tracked the movement. We'll debrief at the station. He turned to call over another officer, and that's when Reynolds saw it, a fresh scratch on the back of Hayes' neck. Deep, angry red. Like someone had grabbed him from behind. Just like Kovac would have done if a cop tried to double-cross him. The FBI agent's warning echoed in his skull. He was here to meet a cop. Reynolds forced himself to breathe normally. If Hayes was dirty, the station was the last place he should go. But surrounded by armed officers, with no weapon and no backup, running wasn't an option. So he did the only thing he could. He played along. "Let's get this over with," Reynolds said, walking toward the squad cars like nothing was wrong. Every hair on his neck stood up, waiting for the click of a safety being thumbed off behind him. The flash drive burned in his pocket. Whatever was on it, someone was willing to kill for it. And now they knew he had it. The fluorescent lights of the precinct buzzed overhead as Reynolds sat in the interrogation room, a place he'd only ever been on the other side of the table. They'd left him alone for 20 minutes. Standard procedure, they'd said. But he knew better. He studied the mirrored glass. Were they watching him right now? Running his name through databases? Deciding how to handle a cop who knew too much? His fingers drummed against the metal table. The flash drive was still tucked in his pocket, a tiny weight against his thigh. He needed to see what was on it, but his phone had been confiscated for the investigation. The door clicked open. Hayes walked in, followed by Lieutenant Grayson, a grizzled veteran with cold eyes. Neither looked happy. Grayson dropped a file on the table. Ballistics matched Kovac's gun to 2 homicides in Ohio. "Good work, Reynolds." The praise felt like a trap. Hayes leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Funny thing, though. Witnesses said there was another shooter. Some guy in a black jacket." Reynolds kept his face blank. "Lot of people running. Hard to say who was who." Grayson flipped open the file, revealing a grainy still from a park security camera. It showed the FBI agent crouched behind a tree, rifle raised. "This look like a panicked civilian to you?" Reynolds' pulse spiked. They had footage. How much had it captured? Did it show the agent handing him the drive? Hayes pushed off the wall. "Here's what I think happened. That Fed was dirty. Maybe Kovac was his CI, maybe it was a deal gone bad. Either way, he needed a fall guy. He tapped the photo. And he picked you." The lie was so smooth Reynolds almost admired it. They were boxing him in, either admit to working with a rogue agent, or take the blame himself. Grayson sighed like a disappointed father. "Give us the flash drive, son. Whatever he told you, it's bullshit." Reynolds almost laughed. They were begging for that drive. Which meant whatever was on it could bury them. He leaned forward, playing desperate. "You're right. He gave me something." Both men tensed. "But it's not here." Hayes' jaw tightened. "Where is it?" Reynolds met his stare. "Somewhere you'll never find it." The room went dead silent. Grayson's hand drifted toward his hip. Then the fire alarm went off. The klaxon screamed through the precinct as red emergency lights strobed. Grayson and Hayes exchanged a glance. This wasn't part of their plan. Reynolds didn't hesitate. He flipped the table into Grayson's gut and bolted for the door. Hayes lunged, fingers grazing his shirt, but Reynolds twisted free and burst into the chaos of the hallway. Officers scrambled everywhere, some heading for exits, others toward the alarm panel. No one noticed one more cop running in the crowd. He ducked into the evidence locker room, empty, the duty officer gone to respond to the alarm. His hands shook as he logged into the computer with his still-active credentials. The flash drive clicked into the USB port like a bullet chambering. Files exploded across the screen. Bank transfers from offshore accounts to Hayes' sister's business. Audio transcripts of Kovac's calls with a cop referred to only as H. Case files showing Grayson had buried 2 prior complaints about Kovac. The final document was a video file dated last night. Reynolds clicked play. Security footage showed the FBI agent's partner, a young woman in a blazer, meeting Hayes behind a diner. Their conversation was inaudible, but the ending was clear. Hayes pulled his gun and shot her point blank. The screen froze on Hayes wiping his prints off the murder weapon, Kovac's distinctive pistol. A voice behind Reynolds said, "Should have taken the deal." Hayes stood in the doorway, service weapon drawn. The fire alarm still wailed. No one was coming to help. Reynolds turned slowly, hands raised. The computer screen cast a sickly glow on Hayes' face, twisting his familiar features into something monstrous. "You set this whole thing up," Reynolds said. "Kovac was your cash cow until the feds got too close. So you had him kill the agent's partner, then lured him to the park to clean up loose ends." Hayes smiled. "And now you're the rogue cop who killed an FBI agent and stole evidence." His finger tightened on the trigger. Tragic. The gunshot was deafening in the small room. Hayes staggered, blood blooming on his shoulder. Behind him, Lieutenant Grayson lowered his smoking pistol, face grim. "Guess I'm loose end number 3, Grayson said. Hayes snarled and spun to fire, but Reynolds tackled him. They crashed into a shelf of evidence bags, Hayes' gun skittering across the floor. Grayson moved to help. Bang! Grayson collapsed, clutching his stomach. At the door stood Chief Morrison, her service weapon steady. "Everyone freeze." Hayes went limp under Reynolds. "Chief." "Thank God." "Shut up, Hayes." She kicked his gun away. "We just raided your sister's house. Found enough cash to buy a small country." She nodded to Reynolds. "You all right?" As backup swarmed the room, Reynolds finally exhaled. The flash drive had done its job. 1 week later, the local paper ran a front-page story, "Corrupt Cops Exposed by Fallen FBI Agents' Evidence." There was no mention of the mysterious second agent, he'd vanished like smoke. Reynolds stood at the park bench where it all began, flipping the FBI badge wallet in his hands. Inside was a note. "Keep it. You've earned the right to ask questions." He smiled and pocketed the badge. The view from this bench really was something special.